Okay, let's do this. So our research here is a work in progress. And as the title suggests, it's about artificial intelligence and generative AI to help us deliver better teaching and learning. I'm an associate professor in New Zealand at an institute where we have mainly bachelor's and master's degree courses. And I'm really happy to be here. And this is one of the first times probably I'm interested in hearing from others rather than delivering completed research myself. So moving on. So the goal here is focusing particularly on ChatGPT, which we have started using, and want to use it increasingly more in our teaching and assessment practices and use them in an ethical and productive way, use this in that way. And the first step that we needed to do here was to examine what other educators are doing around the world through the literature review and other means, like attending conferences and workshops. And our goal is to add some new practices in the long run. So we've had quite a few consultations with the local IT industry, and they have also stressed how much they've started using ChatGPT and similar tools themselves. So as IT students, our computing students particularly need to be aware of these tools graduating and going into the industry. And the industry is already using these tools to help them with coding, design, and particularly documentation. And so using them similarly in an ethical and productive way, we want to have our students learn these skills and be ready to take part in industry during them. So the user or the student, the programmer, the developer will be engaging with ChatGPT, not in a passive way, but also expanding what ChatGPT provides and customizing whatever ChatGPT provides to them. To be more specific, we want to see ChatGPT raise the quality and quantity of what our students produce for their assignments. So not only their own input and skill, but also benefit from ChatGPT as a tool that assists them to do even better. So the simple, just for the purpose of this presentation, which is part of a bigger project and other research questions, but the one here today is about, can generative AI help us with technical learning, and how possibly. So some of the pedagogic teaching and learning approaches that we have in mind at the start of the project, we've had in mind late 2023 and forward. One of them is get these tools to help us with active learning rather than passive learning or lecture-based learning, and use these tools for what we call scaffolding among educators. So gradual learning and giving them resources and support along the way. So we believe that ChatGPT can help create some of these resources, such as templates, examples, discussions, and so forth. And it's really suitable, we think, particularly for technical education, as any type of other education at any age group. Gamification, games, quizzes, where we need questions. For example, ChatGPT can help generate those for us. And we find that that could be engaging for students to take part in these and sort of be motivated by their score and learn along the way. ChatGPT is also good from a dialogue, question and answer type learning, where it can engage in conversations with the learner, aside from the conversations that they've had with their regular educator or teacher. And in the context of IT education, Um, Sometimes there are multiple ways of doing something. So there are multiple software algorithms that could be done, or multiple ways to run or execute the same software. But so ChatGPT can help by giving them a way that's different from what they had thought originally, or ChatGPT could be prompted to come up with different alternative ways of solving a problem, and the student would be um, asked to provide their own critical thinking and to choose what might be suitable in a context. Assessment is another area that we're sort of interested in. So there's also a lot of research happening in this way is how do we assess someone who is obviously using these tools at the same time? How do we assess their performance? So that's something we'd be looking at in the future. However, the interactions that they have with ChatGPT, of course, will be saved and will be also used as evidence for their assessment later on. So the wider project, I'm talking a little bit about the wider project. So this paper, I'll talk a little bit about the literature review and what the literature shows us is happening around the world, a little bit of that. And of course, since we've already started doing this, some of the reflections of myself or my colleagues here. In the second part, of course, later this year, what we expect is we'll be experimenting with different methods, approaches, full-on implementation, and we'll be measuring it in a more quantitative way. So at the moment, we're exploring and brainstorming quite a bit. Now, the literature review shows us that starting with Google Scholar, of course, we see an increasing number of articles being published in this field in the last 3 full years that have gone past. Um, and those numbers on the right-hand side are the basis, and then we go on to the left-hand side and narrow it so that we'll only pick the ones that are typically in Scopus as well, or indexed there. They match certain keyword combinations, and we have extended it now to 2024 to include 2024. But of course, full text, peer reviewed, and we'll pick only articles with that have had citations, at least a few citations or more. Some of them have had plenty in the meantime. So looking at with a literature review, looking at some of the publications where we can expect to find articles published in this field. There's quite a few journals that are published through Science Direct, Elsevier. There's Springer that's also publishing quite a few journals and volumes in the field. IEEE Access, IEEE Transactions. We can see a lot of articles turning up there. And also some of the more regional journals, such as the Australian Asia based one. And of course, there's another one at the top, which is more Iberian, Spain and Portugal. So the articles that we typically find from 2022 have had some of the more influential and for us that are applicable to higher education. Typically we can see some of them have already achieved an average of 50 to 60 citations. That's too early for those that are from 2023 or 2024, where we see from the bibliometric analysis, obviously an average of 10, 20 citations per article. But again, these are based on higher university level education. For people who are interested in other subjects, there's amazing articles in K-12, like high schools or even younger. Now, so we've based on our fundamental thinking and rationale. We've got a research grant that we'll be using. We've started updating our course materials, such as assignment handouts, and so to include um, generative AI and ChatGPT in the assessment, so that we'll be able to test them and do quantitative research in the future. And yeah, so one of the approaches that we'll be using is one that was used in a paper by Swapna Gotapati and her or his co-authors, which is the students determine or design what needs to be in the program, in the application, in the app, and then ChatGPT helps them generate the code, or and then they sort of and the student sort of molds it together and configures it, changes it as needed. So the student does understand what the code is supposed to do, um, what the application is supposed to do, and then move on to using ChatGPT to automate the code generation aspect. We are looking for some international collaborations because obviously a lot is happening in other parts of the world. So one of our staff here, Isran, is contacting a German technical university to see how we can sort of collaborate and some brainstorm and test things, test the same instruments or research in both countries. So while we do this, with the help of ChatGPT, of course, what would be good for learners, especially mature learners in the last year of their bachelor's degree, typically or higher, is to ask them to do a reflective diary while they're using ChatGPT, so that we have evidence of their critical thinking or what they are getting from ChatGPT and how they're benefiting from ChatGPT. Which could help us with our qualitative research. The other approaches, of course, will be more of a questionnaire type, perhaps. So in terms of our personal reflections as educators, of course, last year ChatGPT was based mostly on reading, typing reading, but of course, we find this year that the students are preferring sort of read aloud, sort of interacting via voice, via audio with ChatGPT. So some students that don't necessarily enjoy reading, they find this quite useful to listen to it rather than try to read it on the screen. ChatGPT does provide a lot of additional instructions aside from the code, which could be helpful in some contexts. ChatGPT is critiqued in the literature, in some of the literature, for generating incorrect content, which we recognize. In our testing, we found some of that to be not necessarily incorrect per se, but it was actually irrelevant to that context or extra information that was not needed, sort of bit of noise that really wasn't needed. So what we think is as in moving on is that it's okay for students to use it as a tool and to value what it generates and accept it a majority of the time. But we're also giving the advice to students that they, in the end, as the humans, are responsible for whatever product or report they deliver. So they assume full responsibility. They need to read or listen to everything completely and carefully that's generated by AI, and to ascertain, to reflect on what is irrelevant, what they see as irrelevant, or what they see as missing for their particular task. And then they could improve that content. Maybe it's part of an application or a report that they can add the New Zealand context to it, or they can add the context from our own curriculum in our own qualifications. So finally, of course, some of the interesting themes that in that literature review that I had mentioned, obviously the major benefit that it not only generates content, but also generates really useful explanations for learners. And then the second theme was, of course, some of the content is really not perfect. So that's areas that we're exploring. So I mean, we're happy to continue this research in the second part of the project. And I can already see from some of the other presenters and their titles and abstracts that people around the world are making rapid progress. So whatever the literature shows us in the last few years is already sort of being outdated as we speak. So for us, that tells us that we need to come up with even more innovative ways that maybe other people hadn't thought of yet, and which is really hard to do. Some of the references that I've used inside the presentation, or although the literature review has a lot more, I'm happy to take questions